Tabletopped will start after the following messages.
Are you looking for something comfortable to wear and keep your brain warm while playing tabletop games? Daily Dose of Yarn makes handmade, customized beanies for all of your style and comfort needs. She can even help you with a custom beanie to represent your favorite character. Check out Daily Dose of Yarn on Instagram and Etsy to order your new favorite beanie today.
The world is electric with psychic energy, an interconnected web of memory and emotional echoes that only animals are able to perceive. Nowhere is that energy more powerfully present than in human trash. Psychic Trash Detectives is the first release from Scripted Games. In this collaborative tabletop role-playing game, players create their own psychic trash animals like raccoons and possums. They mine trash for psychic clues to solve a mystery plaguing their animal community. It is a game that absolutely reeks of radical self-acceptance and punk camaraderie. You can pledge Psychic Trash Detectives now on Kickstarter. Live fast, touch trash, solve mysteries.
Hey everyone, I hope everyone's been having a great week. I know I have. I have had 7 straight days of birthday parties for Tabletopped. Not really, that would be insane. But Tabletopped has been having a nice little run here. So why don't we end it with such a great episode? Oh my lord, I love talking about horror games. I can't wait to do more of it in the coming year. But this is the first time we really sank our teeth into how to run a game with a horror setting or horror themes. It's just such a great one, and it's funny too, and Sean and Greg are great. We're gonna have them more on in the new year as well, so I hope you enjoy this classic from the vaults. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletopped. Today we are talking about horror, the spooky, the scary, and the Halloween towns in which we experience those things.
Yes.
So who do I have with me today? As always, I'm Nick, and who's across the table?
Hello, it's Greg. How's it going?
Hi, it's Sean. I'm also here today.
Cool. And both of you, I know, like, Greg, you basically watch horror movies to relax, if I understand correctly, yes?
Yeah, pretty much, when I'm looking and listen to podcasts, it's one of those things where it's like, man, the world's a pretty dark place. There's all these horrible things happening to people. How should I relax? And I have fallen asleep with earbuds with like people running away and screaming in the forest from some terrifying monstrosity. I don't know. It lulls me.
And Sean, I know we have a Discord where we all talk, and once I was like, yeah, guys, I need like a scary movie to watch with some friends. Like, any advice? And you sent one. I was like, oh, let me look this up. And it was literally like everything I saw was like, this is the scariest movie you will ever see. Please do not watch this movie.
I have been a fan of the horror genre for a long time. I used to fancy myself a horror writer. There's a whole memory I could relate. I shouldn't, but
great.
No.
Fair enough.
No. Back in school when I was a kid, there was story time, and everybody knew I liked to write horror stories, and it was around Halloween, and I'd missed the bus that day, and so when I got to school, everybody was sitting around in a circle, sharing stories and everything, and then I walked in, and everybody started clapping because they really wanted to hear all the crazy shit that I'd written.
Oh,
and
wow.
They thought that I was going to miss that day, so
that's awesome.
Horror is fun.
So, I mean, from just those little bits, you can tell that I've gathered the greatest, the best, the horror aficionados I know to talk to us about how to both run horror, the elements of horror, and also being in a horror campaign, what that means and what that feels like. So I've run a horror campaign. Sean, I've been in one of your horror one-shots. Greg, I've just like heard all of the wild stuff that you've kind of been a part of. So what do you think makes what are the elements, the tripod on which a horror campaign or story stands? What do you guys feel like has to be in there? It doesn't have to be like this monster, but like what do you think of when we think of a horror campaign?
Well, I think to start, it has to be fun. Like horror is at its base something that that makes us very tense, and the amount of joy we get from that tension is that tension being released. You know, when you know that it's not you that's being eaten by the monster in the closet, when you know that the character you really like, they're actually safe, they're fine. You know that tense buildup. So. Fun first of all, and probably tension second, or maybe I should switch that because you have to have
gotta make the tension.
You gotta
then
make the
release
tension
it.
to have the, but like I'd say tension.
Yeah,
probably.
What about you, Greg?
There's a couple. I agree with you when it comes to like releasing tension, making things fun and scary, because we joke about how I use horror to relax and stuff like that, but on the other hand, it is kind of a thing where it's like there have been studies. Don't ask me what. I have no
studies. I don't know. Shut up.
Yeah, I have no idea. But there's a theory out there where it's like when you're watching like a horror movie or something like that, even though you are tense and you are scared, there is a part of your brain that is realizing like, okay, that shark is not going to be coming towards me, and that's fun. I would also say like if you're trying to like actually scare somebody, I also think one of the awesome things is a little bit of ambiguity in the beginning, because there is a lot of, until you eventually reveal it. I mean, there's also so many different types of horror genres, but for me what I love is like when you're facing a threat, you don't know what that threat is in the beginning. You have to uncover it bit by bit, and the more you find out, the more it dawns on you like, oh crap, this is not good.
Yeah,
this is why Monster of the Week is the best horror campaign you can run.
I want to play it. One of these days.
Can't wait. But yeah, that encroaching dread that just keeps building, and then you find little pieces, little clues. Little things happen in sort of a scary way that just build the mystery and the suspense and the terror. Slowly grows as things are uncovered. So you'd think it would be less frightening as you're solving the puzzle, but it's not. It's worse somehow.
The thing for me about horror is that I think that horror and knowledge are so intertwined, where if you know what's in the forest and you know what its like weaknesses, or you know how it works, there is a sense that of like relief then becomes more of a planning thing of like, how do I get through this minefield? But the thing about a minefield is that it's really scary when you don't know where the mines are. So I do feel like I agree with that a lot, both of your sentiments of like start with. And I think a lot of campaigns kind of in most systems start you off with this pretty well, where you're like a low level, you don't know anything. You're not super strong. You're not, whatever. You just have to sort of figure it out as you go. Daniel hates, this is our podcast moment where we blast Daniel, but Daniel hates that sometimes, like I do have a trope in a lot of my campaigns about memory, because I think it's so fascinating how like the stories we tell ourselves can be so subjective. But a lot of times I like strip away characters' memory in certain moments so that I can let them be closer to the players that they are, so that they can have around the same amount of knowledge. Daniel hates it. He hates it so much. He's like, what is this? Where I would know this. I'm like, no, you don't remember. And he's like, fuck that. I remember this.
There's been this homebrewed monster or something that's been going around the internet, I think, called like the False Hydra.
Oh my God. Yeah. Very cool.
And I was reading it like one Christmas morning because
Jesus, Greg, what the fuck is wrong with you?
I don't know. I don't know. Also, don't listen to this, Maggie, please. Anyway, so suffice to say, this was before everybody was asleep, but suffice to say, what the thing is like the False Hydra. What's a cool monster about this is that it's a monster that when it eats its victims, everybody who knew the victim forgets about who they were, essentially. So, there's like, you'll find like, so, they're like, if a player characters are going around and they come across this like village or something like this, and they encounter like a woman and she's like, hi, I'm there. And it's like, just like this single woman living here, it's like you have a very big house and there's a lot of male clothes in like this closet, and they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about, and then they'll start weeping uncontrollably and they won't know why. And then,
it's really cool because I was reading about it too, and it's sort of like there's an area of influence that the Hydra kind of affects, and it also is like you see it and then it like makes you forget it. Yeah. And so it's just like something that is just gnawing at the back of your player's mind. So it's a really cool thing that you can like drop into, hey, you've been in this village for a while and like, what do you guys want to do? And then you can start bringing in some stuff of like, things are fucked up here. Why are things so fucked up? You've been here for a month. Nothing bad has happened. And then you lead them into the thing. It's really cool. I love that monster.
Yeah. And the best part about it is that what I love where the clues come from is that it's not like a perfect forget. Like, it's not a blank thing. Like, it makes the consciousness of the person forgets like the victim, but the subconscious is not fooled. Yeah. So sometimes they'll be like writing you a letter, and it'll be, if you're like, you get a letter from a friend, it's like, hi, everything's going good. I miss you. It ate him. I saw him ate it. I don't know why. And then it's like, I hope to see you too. Ooh, love you. Bye. And it's just like, oh, this is bad.
Well, this is actually something that I think is so important in horror is so. I talked about it in a previous episode, but there is this theory that I read somewhere that horror is just taking the comfortable and altering it enough that your mind recognizes it, but it's like Uncanny Valley, where you're just like,
where it's just a little uneasy.
Yeah. And that's the sort of thing that I'm not super into slashers. I'm not super into like you're just being chased all the time, because they're, especially in a role-playing game, you can't make that feel scary.
No, it's just like, well, we've got stuff. We can just fight him. I'll cast Fireball. That didn't work. We'll hide and we'll try something else. But it's hard because so a slasher doesn't work quite as well in a campaign too, because you're not. The reason a slasher movie works is because the characters are being picked off, but you can't just keep picking off characters in your party, because that makes for a very short.
Yeah, they kind of have to survive unless you're playing a very specific type of campaign.
Yeah, it's one. Well, with a slash, and also when it comes to the level of threat and stuff like that too. Like Jason Voorhees going after a bunch of like college teenagers who have no idea what they're doing. It's not gonna end well for the poor teenagers. But a slasher person coming after, like, say, our D&D campaign, not to brag, but we'd probably obliterate them.
Yeah, there's a power creep.
There's a power creep. There's definitely, and it's one of those things where I think
a power creep, by the way, would be a great monster.
That's amazing.
Named a power creep. Yeah, put it in there.
I think, like, and just to shamelessly, and going back to the whole like idea of the Uncanny Valley and the things like that, to shamelessly steal from Stephen King, he like categorized, I think, horror into like 3 different groups. There's like revulsion, where you're seeing something and it's like blood and guts and that's gross and stuff, and it's like ew, and hacksaws and things, and that's the lowest form. There's terror, that primal fear that you are being hunted by something. I feel like that's the difference between like Jason and Michael Myers, where it's definitely more of a you don't know where the killer is. And then there's Dread, where it's like that's the worst one, because you go into your house, you see your family and they're smiling and they're fine, and you don't know why, but you know in your heart that that is not your family. That is like some replacement. Maybe the smile's a little too big. Maybe there's like a different color, and it's just, it messes with you. And
I mean, so it's so hard to get the first 2 really in a tabletop game. Some systems you can. Again, Monster of the Week's fucking the best. It's just so quick tempo wise that you can have those chase sequences and make them feel like dynamic and it's moving really quick. But if you're like, and like the monster takes out its hacksaw, it's dripping with blood, and it lunges at you. Everyone roll for initiative, please. Sorry, what was your initiative? Okay, and you? No, sorry, roll for initiative. Wait, you have an okay, roll with advantage. It's like totally fucking kills the tempo.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. So for me, in like some of the slower systems, the way you get the fear is everything except for combat.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and the combat, I think, going back to your point, Sean, is the release of that, is like the pleasurable, like, we're overcoming it.
There's finally we get a chance to fight this thing.
Yeah.
It's just sorry, Sean. It's just the thing about like when the monster finally gets revealed. It's like it's the old saying of, oh God, it's a giant praying mantis. It's like it's it's terrifying, but it's not too bad because it's 6 feet tall. I thought it could have been 8 feet tall, and it's just like so.
Yeah.
This could be way worse.
It could have been way worse.
Well, it was like when the creature from It turned out to be a giant spider, and you're just like,
God.
Yeah.
That's it.
Way worse when it's a clown,
yeah,
honestly.
the clown that just randomly turned into stuff was so scary and dreadful, and then the spider's like, oh, you just burn it or something, right?
Yeah.
Take a nap. Get a napkin. You
Yeah.
need a
Just
giant
squish it.
napkin.
Okay,
Need a
guys,
giant-
obviously, we need a giant boot.
Imagine a giant boot. Anyway, off of that. But
it's sort of the Ghostbusters thing, too. It's like when the giant marshmallow man comes.
That was amazing.
that was classic.
Yep.
Great.
I think one of my favorite when it comes to like and also dread and stuff like that is that also when it comes to the level of ambiguity in the Uncanny Valley is that it also I think for especially a D&D game is when you make the players doubt themselves. Because if you are doing something and then it's like, oh no, this is fine, or maybe you're wrong. If you've ever watched the movie The Innocents, which is based off of The Turn of Screw, it's essentially about this woman who is taking care of like 2 kids in the middle of this like house, and she is becoming convinced that the previous caretaker is like haunting these children and is doing because they're saying admittedly these kids are saying some really creepy things.
Yeah, right.
And it's spooky and it's disturbing, but also it never commits to it, which is great because it's kind of like kids are because if you've ever met like kids sometimes say creepy things. So one of 2 things is
Only say creepy things.
they do, and it's sometimes totally no. They do. It's really messed up, but it's one of those things where it's like one of 2 things is happening. Either this woman is seeing ghosts, and that's scary, or this woman is losing her mind, and these 2 children are in a house with a woman who is possibly dangerous to them. And either side is terrifying. And it's like if you can make like a character like think like, okay, this is a monster, but what if they're not? What if you could be hurting somebody who does not deserve it? And it's just like, oh God. I just feel uncomfortable thinking about it.
What do you think are some of the good ways to like get that unease built into a campaign from like the get-go?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Narration.
Well, I mean,
but like that's sort of a joke, but also not. I think that in TTRPGs specifically as a medium, the narrator voice is like so powerful. When you think about a puzzle and you're like, you walk into a room and there's a table and a fireplace and a very strange portrait on the wall. It's like everyone's like, okay, we go check out the portrait. Yeah. So I think that the narrator voice, it like is your biggest tool in setting the tone. Not so much in like, because as it goes on and you have less narration power because the characters are
because they have their own.
Exactly. Yeah. Then, but like when you're setting it up from the jump, like I always write out my first narrative so that
for sure.
Yeah.
Without
that is one of my favorite things to do in a especially in a short story or not a short story in a one shot campaign is like to build sets and then release them into it and see how they work around it. And the narration is key.
But that's such a good point too of like building the sets and then like the sandbox is that in horror a lot of it is discovery, like Greg was saying earlier, and just having a box with just a ton of stuff in it, and you can just keep feeding them stuff that will either drive them towards something that makes them uneasy or can drive them towards danger, or in like other times you can give them clues and hope and stuff like that, like, hey, a door unlocks. It's like, oh, that's great, let's go through the door, guys.
Great idea. This one door. not a trap.
It's also if you're pulling things out of this box, like make some of them tropey.
Yeah.
Right? Because tropes are there for a reason. They're good. It's way better than a jump scare.
Yeah.
Like,
and you really can't do a jump scare.
you can't
Again,
do-
you're limited in your options of how you antagonize your players.
It's like you're not reading scary stories to tell in the dark, and you get to like the very end, it's like, and it was a ghost.
Yeah.
You know, it's more. It's pretty impossible to do a jump scare in TTRPG, but like the tropes that build that initial dread. I remember when I was doing the horror one shot with
Devashka House.
Yeah, the Devashka House, and I had the
I missed that.
like everybody walked through, like the house was old and there was a cemetery, and like there they had the wrought iron gates, and you know, and you walk into the foyer and there's like the paintings and they look strange when you look at them, but they're not quite normal. They're weird settings.
It's like
that's a weird thing to have in the foyer.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's the sort of thing of like you can't put your finger on it.
Yeah.
But something's weird.
and then you know, of course, there's you get inside and there's the two giant suits of armor, and everybody was instantly like, oh, we're knocking those suits of armor down.
Yeah.
we just take these down. They're not going to attack us.
Yeah.
And there was no plan for the armor at
Yeah.
all. That was just a setting. But
And-
the fact that you guys were thinking, oh my
Yeah.
God, we're going to be attacked. Something is off about this house. These suits of armor are after us.
That's actually a really interesting
genius.
sort of like mental psychology of gamers too, where because we were sitting down on Halloween to play like this game, and so we're all like, something fucking scary is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And so you can use that to your advantage too. If you're like a smart DM, you can go in and say like you did and be like, there's like 7-foot suits of iron with thick metal and like a bloody like axe or whatever, and then everyone's like, fuck dude, they are coming alive, we are gonna have to deal with them, we like, and then we probably also felt like, oh, we're the smartest fucking people in the world for taking them apart.
Yeah. I want to take it back. There was one jump scare that I managed to do, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was an in-character jump scare. I don't think anybody at the table went, "Oh no!"
Yeah, sure.
But
Oh my god.
I'd
but
be impressed.
There was like a locked door that was like damp and
Oh,
like
yeah.
seepy and like moldy, and then somebody opened it and like some water and like a mop fell out, and it was just like one of those. Oh, and it's just a mop.
Yeah,
Okay.
which is great because like
Love it.
I feel you did in that moment, and what DMs should really consider throughout any campaign they run, but also in horror, is how are you rewarding your characters for playing the genre. So in that, like you said, it was a character jump scare, and you were rewarding the player for being like, okay, I'm going to do this thing that is, like you said, like kind of a trope. It's something that is expected in some horror movies and stuff where there's something weird about this. I'm going to open this door, and they're willing to accept the consequences of that action.
There's something behind that door.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then you are rewarding them with like, hey, you thought you were gonna get hurt? You're not gonna get hurt, and like you have this fun character moment of like a mop falling out.
Yeah,
and
and then
like, you
all the characters
stupid
like,
guy,
and everyone's like, "Oh my god, I thought it was gonna be a thing."
which
yeah.
is great. It's very smart.
You're not rolling for initiative. You're just
Roll
you're just
for
rolling
mop.
on
Roll for
the floor
mop.
laughing.
Yeah,
Mop has it out for you.
and so this is actually really interesting. In my Monster of the Week campaign, there was an encounter that was within a greater mystery, and all the mysteries are sort of set up as a horror thing, but it's like monster based. In this specific one was that they were in this abandoned paper mill, and they went into the foreman's old office because it had been abandoned for years, and they like looked up on the wall, and there was like this old photograph of everyone like kind of like looking at the camera, and they were all the workers of the mill. And as soon as they walked into the office and they looked at it, they like heard all of the machines start, and then they looked back and they heard all of the people like talking in the mill, and they looked back at the picture and everyone was gone from the picture.
Oh
And
my
so then it was like,
God.
fuck. And then they found like all of these like weird newspaper things of like, oh, the foreman killed everybody in the mill. And then they heard some like a foreman's whistle, and then somebody just starting to walk towards the office. And so I was like, this is never a monster encounter. They're never going to fight this guy.
Yeah.
But they have a time crunch of like, we need to figure out whatever
Yeah.
the fuck is up with this room, because there is someone with a axe, as that we've heard, just like, or we found out, has killed all these people in the past, and like this ghost is just coming for us. And they were like reliving this moment of terror, and it was like a really fun moment. And like you said, it was like, I don't think any of the players were like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, but they were like, we have to figure this
Yeah.
out right now.
yeah, it's building that tension and that suspense, and
Yeah.
that's what you want. So you can get that release like, whoo, when it's over.
Yeah. No, that is just, oh, man, that is ingenious. Nick, you devious bastard.
There's a game that Franco, who has been on the podcast and is in our D&D group, I think he hates Betrayal. I'm pretty sure he hates it, but I love that game.
I do too. I own it, by the way, if you want to play it.
Yeah, we're playing it.
I can never find anyone to play it.
I love it. I love
that
but
game.
one of the things I love about that game is because you're a group of dumb kids and a professor or whatever, whoever you are.
You're the Scooby Gang.
And you're going to this house because of some stupid reason, and there's all these creepy things that happen, and that's before the haunt starts.
Yes.
And then the haunt starts, and that can be sort of
brilliant.
used
As an archetype.
as in your TTT RPG setting where, you know, all these creepy things happen, but the haunt hasn't started yet.
Yes.
And then something happens, and now you're actually in danger, and here's the mystery you have to solve, and here's how you have to get out, and here's the scary thing at the end that you have to fight or run away from or destroy the phylactery or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting of like building in small events that are not going to solve the problem that they're in, but they are things to be dealt with or at the very least experienced. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and just creepy things. The I remember you guys walked into the dining room and there was like rotting food, but like a platter of silver platter that just had a bunch of black flies on it, and everyone thought the platter was like, what's up with the platter? It's like, no, it just got a bunch of black flies on it. It's gross. And you wave them away, and they go, oh, and they come back to the platter, and it's just a weird, gross, creepy thing.
Yeah. I think that it's also, horror is a genre that is rife for improv as well, because if something strikes you in a moment, especially if your characters are like, this is happening, I think that we have to try this and this and this, you can use all of that information and create a lot of those, what you're saying, either false flags or
False
just like
flags,
weird
stuff.
stuff.
Or just take their ideas like, oh, this is freaking them out, make them a little bit right, and then make it a little bit wrong too.
Well, going back to what you were talking about using tropes. One of the great things about it is that you are using the tropes against them, because let's be honest, a lot of us in this group are horror like nerds, and we are always complaining about like when people or victims or would-be victims are doing stupid stuff in the movies, and it's like, I would know how to handle that, but you, knowing your friends, are like, yes, I know how you would handle that, so let's play this about, like the armor thing, where it's like, okay, they're tense, they think that they know this, and it's like, it's like the armor is distracting them from the thing that's slithering up the ceiling or something like that. It's just, it's one of those, your players are going to be smart, usually.
Well, sometimes.
Even if the characters aren't, usually your players are playing at the top of their intelligence, and you just have to be aware of that.
Yeah,
right?
It's like use that against them, because it's just because I know that I am like, I'm going to stop all this stuff from happening. Oh man, I missed that one thing. It's bad. So, and it just causes more tension, because it's like, okay, this threat's gone, but where is it then?
I mean, you don't know if that drip from the ceiling is just a drippy, leaky roof, or if it's the drool from a xenomorph. You don't know until you look up.
Yeah. Oh, that's the worst part.
Speaking of the worst part, we're just going to take a quick break, and we will be right back after this. Tabletopped is brought to you by the following sponsor.
Are you looking for something comfortable to wear and keep your brain warm while playing tabletop games? Daily Dose of Yarn makes handmade, customized beanies for all of your style and comfort needs. She can even help you with a custom beanie to represent your favorite character. Check out Daily Dose of Yarn on Instagram and Etsy to order your new favorite beanie today.
How do you guys try to stop the analysis paralysis that comes with smart players, or, I mean, whatever players, that are trying to figure out...
Wary.
Yeah, who are wary and are trying to figure out something that's happening while going through it. Because, like, I think we've all experienced a thing where, like, this weird thing is happening, you're all in the room together, and everyone just starts going, okay, what spells do we have? Or what are we going to try to do here? Let's game plan this. And it's not so much in character, it's more like how we got to survive this encounter or whatever it is. And it kind of... For me, tempo is so important, and so it slows things down.
It does slow things down.
Yeah.
You've got to light a fire on them. You've got to, have something that the clock is ticking down, and you can just interrupt them as a DM and say, "All right, guys, well this is all well and good, but what do you want to do because the walls are closing in?"
Yeah. I mean, I've done this to you guys in Westwood a few times, where you guys will be like talking, and I'll be like, somebody across the room just punches one of you or something like that, like just instigates something because it's just taking like a second that I'm like, hey, the world is continuing without you, and it's just a reminder. It's not trying to punish anyone. It is just like, hey, as a reminder, the clock is continuing to move, the world is going on, and you guys, if you can choose to stay there and do this, but like you are slowly distancing yourself from the current pace of events.
Right. Like a distant scream.
Yeah.
You hear a distant scream and you're like, it's like,
oh fuck.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways. I think that Sean, you had mentioned in your previous Under the Bed, like this, what was it again?
The bone claw?
The bone claw.
The bone
claw. Like, one of the things I liked about the idea is, like, it's, killing it doesn't necessarily stop it. It comes back, like, having, like, a persistent, like, force that's coming towards you, and the longer you take, the closer this thing gets to you. It's
yeah. There is something to be said for that, because, like, have you guys ever played the Amnesia games, or like watched them, or are generally aware of them?
Yeah,
they're sort of a game in which it's just sort of like a game where the monsters are hyper deadly and you really can't fight them. So anytime you're seen by them, or basically fuck up the game somehow, you just have to run and hide, because they're just gonna get you if they get close. And so I think the reason why that was so scary to so many people is it takes agency and power away from you. And I think that is really important too. And like the thing about the bone claw, which I find really interesting, and I've always thought I've wanted to run a monster like this, is that it is taking away your agency as a person who can protect themselves, because even if you do successfully do it, it comes back. Like the thing that I've always wanted to do is make I love ghosts, so it would probably be a ghost, but a monster where if you kill it, it comes back with double the hit points, and every time you kill it, it actually gets worse. And so you're actually encouraged not to fight this thing, because you're making the problem worse every time.
That's great.
And then you have to figure out the overall plot of it,
Yeah. Shoot, I don't want to go back to the bone claw, but I have to. Because it was I meant to use it at different points in the Dvotsky house, because it was the boss at the end. Although now that I'm thinking about it, you never went and found the person who owned the phylactery, so that's gonna have to circle back at some point. But I meant to use it because it can grab you from the dark, and I meant to just have it do that sometimes before you encountered it.
Yep.
And it wouldn't grab anybody and like do any damage. It would just I would just like make a dexterity saving throw, and you'd be like, why? Like, I don't know.
I don't know.
Just do it.
just shut up, nerd. Just do it.
No particular reason. Nothing's coming at you from the dark at all to eviscerate
and then
you.
But then you like, all right, you made your dexterity saving throw, and you don't want to actually grab the person, so you pick somebody with a high dex.
Yeah.
You just roll, and you're like, okay. Bill, make a dexterity saving throw, and Bill's a rogue, and he makes a dexterity saving throw. It's like, all right, you see something coming out of the shadows to grab you, but you dodge out of the way, and it vanishes.
Yeah.
And that just feels like, well, what was that? You're like, we don't know. We'll find out, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's also important, is the slow drip of what they are dealing with has to also come out. Like, you can't just be like, and then a big monster runs down the thing at you, unless that is your version of a slow drip. That's terrifying. But like, one thing that I like to do is let the players see the monster in some way, in a way that they're like, they actually don't clock that it's the monster. Like there was one time I did a mystery called King of the Forest, where it was this coffin that these like construction workers had dug out and on accident sort of like opened, and then we just kind of cut away from it, and then they were in a hospital at one point trying to figure out something, and there's just like a bunch of deer outside, and they were like, oh hey, cool, deer. And then the deer just like kind of caught this person that was getting out of their car and just started eating them, and they were like, bad deer.
If there's one thing I've learned, never trust the deer in a horror setting ever.
And so then it became a thing where they're like, okay, animals are not to be trusted. And then there would just be times where they'd be like driving or walking and be like, you like look over and you just see the tree is full of crows that are all just like looking down at you. And then then you kind of like let them have little bits of, I am looking at my fear, but I can't quite comprehend it yet.
Yeah, it's just this ominous feeling.
Yeah.
All the birds are looking at us, and what are you gonna do? Like shoot magic missile at the bird because it's looking at you? Like, maybe I did do that once, but I mean, to be fair, I was being safe.
Of course, that's what you always do.
You shoot first, ask questions later.
It's gotten you in so many.
It was the sorcerer. It's fine.
Yes,
they're knowing.
we all know the sorcerer. Yeah.
We've talked about the sorcerer in other podcasts.
The thing that just makes that makes you want to shoot a magic missile at the crow. They don't have to do it, but you have to make them want to do it.
Yeah. No. Agreed.
Yeah, and I think another thing that is interesting to play with is scarcity of resources. So especially when it comes to spells and things like that, if you can get them to burn things, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
Then it becomes scarier.
Yeah.
Because then because you're slowly weakening yourself. I think that it's really important because power creep is a thing, and you really have to make it so that, and your players, if they're cool players and they want to be there with you doing this kind of fun genre piece, they're gonna allow it to some extent. Like, they're probably not gonna allow you to be like, and all of your weapons vanish, but you could probably be like, there's different puzzles throughout it, and they have to channel their magic into the puzzle or something to unlock a door somewhere else, and every time they do that, they expend a spell slot or something.
Or just whittling down their hit points and their spell lists by, like, I think there was an unkillable mannequin in a hallway, and it, like, you had the black candle, and it only took damage when the candle was lit, but it kept blowing out the candle.
Yeah.
And so it just made like 8 spell slots and hit points just a little bit here and there.
What horror show is this?
It was good, Greg, because like when we came in, the candle was like lit in its hands, and we're like, oh, that's fucking weird, and then it just went like, and we're like, oh,
no, bad.
That is very good.
Oh man.
Yeah, I think that a lot of my horror that I like to do is all about the unexplainable or the unintelligible. So by giving somebody a story that even when they get to the end of it, maybe they don't have all the pieces still, and you're just sort of like, that fucking still creeps me out. Because like the way that happened seems so foreign or strange. Like in the Devotchka house, even when we left, we were like, we sort of had the rough edges of what happened in the house. Yeah. But we were like, what the fuck? Like, we just
what
gotta
actually
get
happened.
out of here. Yeah.
I also
amazing.
I want to live there.
We're gonna camp out.
We'll have to.
Have some s'mores.
I'll cast a forgetful spell on you. You'll have to forget this whole conversation. I'll run it for you sometime. But
yay!
One of the things I loved about running that was to set the scene, the ambiance, the zombie-ance, and part of it was to have music in the background. The slow, like cello music, and like the deep, unsettling thing, like the high piano keys and the quick trills, and then you found the music box that belonged to that little ghost girl, and I had the music box playing, and the little soundtrack it does so much, and it takes very little effort.
Yeah, 13 candles. I think 13 candles, right?
I think it's 13 candles.
Yeah, 13.
Don't know. What is 13
Am I thinking
candles?
Of 13 ghosts? There's 12 candles.
12 candles.
Okay. Jesus. Okay. So 12 Candles is a game that really goes into that. Sean, I think that you would fucking love it. We'll play it eventually, but bring a sense to the table of ceremony and mood as well. Like you were just saying, like you had everything kind of set up, and we were also experiencing as we were engaged more than just the imagination, right? And so in 12 Candles, what they do is they physically have 12 lit candles, and everything else is like you turn off all the lights while you do it. And so you are playing in the dark, and you like another great thing that you do is at the very beginning you record a message from your character going out on this mission, like going out into this last adventure, because everyone always dies. and And then another thing that they do is that between every scene, when a candle is extinguished, the GM will say, we know these things are true. The world is dark. And then everyone will go around for each of the candles and say something true about the world. And then at the end, the DM says, and we are here. And then as you extinguish the candles, you know less and less about the world. And then eventually it's just, and the world is dark and nobody's here anymore.
Wait a second. Gone. Is this the game you wanted us to play in a cabin?
Yeah, I wanted
cabin
to play
in New Hampshire,
Greg, I wanted
in the
to play
middle of the wood.
It just takes so long. It's like a 3-hour game.
Yeah.
Nick, when I told you, remember when I was saying, like, I like watching horror movies? Doesn't mean I want to be in one. That's like some Bloody Mary stuff.
Oh, man, I haven't even told you about all of this. There's, like, so many cool mechanics. Also, I probably will just do a deep dive into this game eventually, but there's a mechanic where you have these index cards with traits of your character that the group generates at the beginning. And so you have a positive trait, like a natural leader, and then you'll have a negative trait, like alcoholic. And as you go through the game, if you fail a roll, that either means the scene is over and you have failed and something bad is going to happen, and it can be really bad, like you crash the car and break your leg, and then you're just in the middle of a road somewhere with a broken leg. You can choose to burn one of these attributes by literally setting them on fire in one of the candles and putting them into the bowl in the middle, and that attribute has been burned out of your character. So like a leader might this last thing, like, choose to take command of a situation and like solves the problem, but is like completely like broken from it and is just like completely overwhelmed with guilt because of what he had to do in that moment, and feels like he was an authoritarian, and then just can never really function the same way again. So you literally are burning away parts of your character. It's fucking great. I love this game. It's
Sounds
so cool.
Charming.
It's so cool, guys.
I can't wait to go into the in a cabin in the
I'm not.
woods.
No. God damn you all.
But no, actually, to get back, what you were saying about the cabin, that reminded me, how you don't want to be in a horror movie. Well, the people who are in horror movies and stuff, they don't know that they're in a horror movie until it's too late.
Yeah.
And that's when the haunting is started. Otherwise, it's like, oh, this is a weird thing. Oh, this is totally... Because as humans, we love to brush off the abnormal. Have you ever like been just in your house and you hear a weird noise and you pause and you just your ears perk up, your eyes get wide, and nothing happens for 3 seconds, and you go about doing what you're doing, like a deer in the woods, and you don't know. Just because somebody didn't make another noise doesn't mean you're not going to get axe murdered.
It's like you like perk up and then you're like, nothing. And then you kind of sneeze and someone behind you goes, bless you.
Exactly. So the people in the horror movies don't know they're in horror movies until, maybe don't tell your players that you're running a horror thing until they do. Like if you're running Curse of Strahd or whatever, then it's pretty obvious. But maybe they don't know.
Well, that's what I think is great about like throwing like a horror like in a campaign, like say, I don't know, Forgotten Realms or something like that, because you don't necessarily expect it's going to be like a horror campaign with like Ravenloft. Well, if you didn't know what you're getting into, I don't know what to tell you, but when you're going to, as you're like, hey, it's Forgotten Realms, you're doing stuff. Like I could see Shades going, hey, there's this one house in the middle of Waterdeep. You go in there, the door shuts, and it's like, oh geez,
fuck.
We goofed up bad. And
we done goofed.
We done goofed. It's so and it's a great way to surprise somebody. You throw some horror when usually there isn't, because
Senfi gets a new patron.
Yeah.
I mean, how many patrons do they have?
There is kind of like an interesting thing too, where this is a problem that I have always solved by doing bad things to the characters, like friends and stuff like that, like basically causing the consequences of actions to affect everyone around my characters instead of my characters directly. Because I found that if you hurt a character too much, and I think that Shade is a perfect example of this, because Sebney has been murdered so many times to the point now where Shade's like, yeah, he died. Like, hey, it happened again. Like that sort of mental framing that people naturally do when something bad happens to them, like continuously, that they have to like shift their framing to be like, this is okay. Yeah. Like you can't really let that happen to your players, because then if that happens, then your biggest tool of, hey, something bad is going to happen to you if you don't deal with it. Then that is, taken off the table if they're like, okay. you know?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of, it's a really tight balance of bad things can happen to you and bad things are happening, and you have to experience them without completely disassociating. It's
Right.
very
Yeah.
tight.
It's like you can't kill too many NPCs.
Yeah,
to show that there's consequences, because then they're like, oh, another one.
Yeah.
Because you
then
can't
they
fall in
won't-
love with all of them.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I've been hurt before. It's like, it's becoming numb to a situation is the arch enemy of horror, without
Yeah.
a doubt.
Yeah, I had a moment of this which was really interesting. I feel like I've talked about it in the past on the podcast because I only have like 5 stories in my life, but it was a mystery where I was running with Franco, and Franco's character was inside of her own mind, and all of the other players were kind of this like kind of corruption that was trying to turn her into like a dark version of herself, but she didn't know that the other players were in on it, right? And so there was a moment where they were in her mind and in her memories, and she was meeting with her grandma, who was making her the doll that she's had with her the whole campaign. And Franco the player was like, I don't know what to do. And then the other like characters were like, you have to fucking kill her. Obviously, you have to kill your grandma. Look, she's trying to give you the doll that's caused all of this pain and all this stuff.
You
And
monsters.
then, and then Franco was like, God, I don't know. This feels wrong, but I don't know what to do. And I could just see him like kind of like the circuits like breaking, and like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And to this day, I don't know if it was 100% successful or not, because the trick of it was you just have to make good, noble decisions, selfless acts, and you would basically start to weaken the monsters when you finally have to deal with them. But the influence of his player friends being like, you should do this, and Franco being like, I don't think that's right. It's like, so I think it was an interesting episode, but I'm not 100% sure if it was super successful when it comes to terror or fear, but it was like really interesting.
This explains a lot, because I remember in the Argot campaign.
Oh, yeah, that also happened.
Yeah, that happened where they took them away. I was not in on this, but a number of people were, and my character was like, what's going on?
Yeah,
I was
what
already...
the hell?
Yeah, what the hell? I was already freaked out because we were surrounded by worms. Not my favorite thing. As
Famously
not my favorite thing. Though I will say Franco did not... I thank you, Franco, for not venturing into trauma, because we don't want to traumatize
Yeah.
people. We want to get...
Yellow lights, not
Yeah.
red lights.
Not
Yes.
not red lights. We didn't go
Every
there.
time.
But the thing about it is that, yeah, he had told... I know Shade. I can't remember. Were you in on? I don't know.
No, I
You
was
were not in it.
I was 100%.
You were in on it. And there's this one point where my character is like so paranoid, and it's like, which one of you? And I'm like, and I remember, I'm like, which one of you rat bastards is like in on this? And then Shade just patted me on the shoulder, like his character, like, it's okay. And I just drew my sword, like, oh my God, get away from me. I'm gonna start stabbing you all. And I was, part of it was. It was that perfect blend of like, that's how my character would react, but it's also kind of like how I was feeling, like,
Yeah, like,
get
what is it?
away.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
going on? And it's just like this, because again, that is a great way of doing it, because a monster's one thing, but when it's your friends, you don't know. It's,
We've talked about this in a previous episode too, where it's like a fine line where it's a good, it is a little bit of a gimmick, and you want to do it sparingly and for a point, because if you're taking away agency of a character,
it's
like,
like boring for the people that
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So-
but if the people
are into it,
if they're
then
into
it's
it,
so fun.
yeah.
I was kind of into it. That was,
You're like, oh my God, is it Christmas?
This is horrible, but I love it.
yeah, I'm a weird guy.
No, it's why we're fans of horror, because they're horrible things that happen, but we love it. We love when the stupid jock gets cut in half with a chainsaw, because he just deserves it. He's not a real person. He didn't deserve it, but yeah, if there's anybody that's gonna go.
Yeah.
I agree with that in a lot of ways, but I would also sometimes I also caution that too, because one of the things that I've realized what I really like about horror is I feel like for me horror and empathy are really important things.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Because when I care about because when I watch a movie, I don't, unless they're like a walking, talking complete scumbag. And when that happens, it's kind of hard to view them as a character, as an archetype. When I like a character, I really want them to live. And the horror is like, they're so close to getting away. Please run, please run. It's like that's why I love Halloween so much, because I really want Jamie Lee Curtis to get away from Michael Myers. It's and when she's really desperate and she's crying, I'm just like, oh, that poor woman, just yes, stab him in the face, run out of the closet. And it's such a, you want them to be engaged, because otherwise it's a murder fest, and that's not what horror is about. You're rooting for folks.
You do need to root for the folks. You do need to. Well, that's what makes it really fun in a TTRPG setting, is because you are the folks that you're rooting for.
Yeah, it's easier to root for you.
And your
exactly.
friends. Your friends, because you don't want to see your friend who is the jock and he's the fighter. But he's your friend, and he's like, he's a really good dude. I didn't mean the but like and he is your friend.
And he's your friend.
But and so you don't want him to be cut in half by the chainsaw either.
No,
it's
the other jock's fine.
No, it's.
I will say that from a purely mechanical point, that this just popped into my head as you guys were talking, especially for things like D&D. Horror is a place where you can't use nat ones in the ways that you use in other settings or genres, because you can't just be like nat one, you drop the key, it goes down like a sewer grate, or this is a bad example, but you can do that. You can't definitely be like the monster catches up with you and kills you. It's like just not very fun. Like you can't have the consequence be as bad as it might be in other types of campaigns. But the example I just gave is like, if you're like fumbling with the keys and you're trying to unlock a door and you roll in that one or whatever, maybe you drop them, maybe they go into the sewer grate, and you have to figure out another way out of the situation. That is the way you can just, I would always suggest using failures as just making the situation harder but not more lethal.
And more tense, more dreadful. You fail to do a thing, and the room gets darker somehow.
There's such a great book. It is a kid's book. I love it so much. It's called Lockwood and Company, and there is a part in it because it's the idea is that the world is filled with ghosts that only people before they go through puberty can really see. But the ghosts, if they touch you, even if you're an adult, you fucking die. Like, you just turn blue, you swell up, and you die. It's called ghost touch. And so the way the world has dealt with this is they send in these, like, gangs of little kids into these haunted houses to try to solve the where the ghosts are coming from and destroy whatever like, relics are creating them, so the adults can go and live there. So it's just these, like, prepubescent like people going into these horrifying situations and trying to get through it together. And there's this moment where they're in this room and like everything just starts bleeding, like the walls and the ceiling, and every single drop of this blood is a ghost, and if it touches them they die, and they have to get out of the room without touching any of this like rain of blood that's coming down all the walls. It's the best. It's so good.
Parents are the worst.
Yeah, if anyone wants to read a book about setting a tone of like dread, fucking Lockwood and Company. So good. It's a quick read too, because literally it's for kids.
I think, and that's, oh man, and I love Ghosts so much, because what's great about Ghosts too is that, you know, they're the perfect blend of, like, I feel like empathy and horror, because sometimes ghosts are like these, they're not always necessarily malevolent. Like, sometimes
they're just uncaring. Yeah,
they're uncaring, or they cared too much, or they were innocent and they got trapped in these situations that are repeat, and you feel bad, but because they were victims that are in pain, they are lashing out, and they could come for you. And it's just, it's like you don't know whether to hug or run away screaming. It's Ghosts are great.
And I think that at the end of the day, what I try to do with horror campaigns is make sure that whatever trials you put the characters through, that at the end that it's sort of like the adventure wasn't the horrible monster, it was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah.
My friends are monsters. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Especially you, Sean.
That's only slightly, only when I'm DMing, but in a good way. I'm fair. No, and speaking of books, and but like, get good inspiration from books, and
don't be afraid of it, man.
Like, borrow, steal, remold,
borrow from a library.
Go to the library, go check out some stuff, and just reform what you read and what media you put into your brain, and make it your own, and just
turn it into something that your players are going to love and be horrified by.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the best way to transpose rather than to directly steal, which is not a bad thing. Just,
right. Yeah.
Like, you can totally do that. But if you're reading something or you're like, ooh, that's spooky, I want to do it, just do the extra step of like, what about that makes me creeped out, and then just create that situation in the game.
Like, why is this creepy? Why is this give me the heebie-jeebies? Because is it a dark room? Is it the spiders? Is it the whatever it is?
Is it that like you heard like footsteps going down to the basement and the washing machine start and be like, oh, it's mom, and then the mom like walks in, it's like, hey, are you doing laundry? And it's like, oh fuck. And so then you take that and you're like, hey, the tavern, you're like all sitting in a tavern late at night, and like there's like you know, footsteps down the stairs, and then you hear somebody like chopping meat at the cutting block downstairs in the kitchen, and they're all like, oh, it must be the tavern keeper. And then the tavern keeper comes out and is like, why are you guys doing so late at night? Why are you cutting all this meat? And they're all like, shit.
Yeah, this is actually why I have cats. So whatever I hear in the house, I'm like, that was the cat.
It's just like, okay, it's the cat.
It's the cat.
I don't have to be
It's
scared.
fine. Although I did that once, and the cats were both in the room with me.
Yeah.
I was like, then what was that?
No. See, I'm actually dreading the cat thing, because last night I was just hanging around in my house and I was turning things off, and my cat was staring like intently at the basement door, and it's like, hey Audrey, what you doing? Just staring at the door. And it's just like, no, this is...
Nah, cats just stare at doors they're not allowed behind. It's the thing.
Oh, okay. That's
what I tell myself.
If you say so. Yes, that's... God, I have no comfort now.
So as we get to the end here, if we could just like go around and name some like things of inspiration that would like has really helped you or shaped your sense of horror, dread, or things like that, things that people might want to steal from, transpose, or just like some like tips and tricks as we kind of close out here. Let's start with you, Greg. What do you got for us?
Ooh, that's dangerous. A lot of encyclopedia there of like, now, man, I'll just say quickly, like, one of the reasons I love horror is just because I just love monsters. I feel like if part of me wants to be like the David Attenborough of like horror, like, man, this thing.
I love
like,
a cryptid, man.
Yeah.
I love a cryptid.
Cryptid, it's fascinating. It's just, but if I had to do things like, again, going back to the ambiguity and the frightening, like Shirley Jackson's The House on Haunted Hill, I love that. I love the book. The miniseries was pretty good, but just like ghosts and just the feelings of loneliness and just isolation and dark hallways. Big,
big themes of loneliness and isolation. Oh, and dark hallways. Those are really scary.
Dark
You know what?
are really scary.
They really are.
There's only two
Fuck,
directions
man.
to run.
You tell me
It's
wrong.
In front of you.
The dark hallways are always awful.
Yeah, you literally have forward and back, and neither of them are good.
I guess the other thing, like Spielberg's Jaws. I mean, just when you can never see that shark and it's just like dragging things. Also, the ocean's just terrifying.
The ocean
man.
is terrifying.
Just throw them at the ocean. That's what's going to work. Just have the ocean involved. And then finally, I guess if I have to name like one other source, it would be, I just love gothic horror. Like, give me my dark castles, the vampires, the things that, again, it's just a joke. Like it's the reflection of like the darkness within, and just and just showing people what they'd rather have stayed buried.
Yeah.
And that's just you can't go wrong there.
What about you, Sean?
I really like the idea that you can't trust the people around you, even though you should be able to. Like movies like It Follows, where only
is a
you
great
can see
one.
the ghost, and you don't, and they just maybe they look like a normal person just in the crowd, but suddenly they're on you and they're throwing you through the air.
That'd be such a cool thing to do, where you like one person in the party has an item that allows them to see the ghost or whatever, and like everyone else can't see it. That's fun.
It's
yeah,
tense. It's
good.
tension building, and then John Carpenter's The Thing, where it's isolation. You
my
can't
God.
trust anybody around you. This thing is nigh unkillable except with flames. It's I think it's maybe Greg's second favorite
I
horror
can't
movie
believe
next to Jaws.
we took this long to talk about The Thing.
but no,
fail at life.
No. I was saving The Thing for last because it's my favorite horror movie. It's
so great.
It's just because there's nobody makes a bad move in that entire movie, and it's still the bad move to make.
Yeah.
And it's just because you can't trust anybody, and
Yeah.
you can tell everybody like, no, I'm fine. I am not an evil thing, alien creature, but who's gonna believe you?
It's that constant thing of like the prove to me that you exist sort of mindset,
Yeah.
where I know that I exist, but I can never prove that to you. Sort of
exactly.
thing.
And that to me is one of the scariest things ever. Was when you don't know if you can trust the friends around you, which is why I think that thing that Franco did to Greg was so
Very
scary.
Franco, if you're hearing this, I
You
simultaneously
rat bastard.
Yeah, I both love and hate you at the same time, and I will have my revenge. But no, it's not to mention the isolation in that one too, because you cannot go anywhere. You
there's
have to
nowhere to
deal
go.
with
I think that for me, the last thing I'll leave folks with is to really think of the senses, because that's how we experience our world, and to really the way that we feel comfortable dealing with something, or at least cognizant of how we can deal with something, is if we can use all of our senses to kind of suss something out. And so, like you said, when the reason why you have cats is that if you hear something, you're just like, it's a cat. It's like, because you only have one of your senses being activated. But if you saw and heard something, then it becomes a little bit more real. If you saw, heard, and touched something,
if there's a strange smell in the air, if it's just damp in your room suddenly, and there's a strange smell, and you hear a noise behind you, that's a lot of things. It's hard to discount that.
Yeah.
Or out of the corner of your eye, you're like, you think you saw something, but maybe you didn't, or maybe you did.
Yeah, and then that's the last thing I would say is that I really love reading short horror fiction. It's so funny that you said that you're like so into short horror, because even if you just go into like creepypastas or like the SCP Foundation things, inside all of them are like the core of an idea that you can take and run something with. It's like really, really fun. Whether it's just like, hey, you always have to look at it, and if you don't, then it's gonna move, or that there's like a back room dimension that you start in there and there's something in there as well, and it's just gonna fuck you up if it finds you and you gotta get out. Like, there's a ton of things that you can just take.
It's great. You can do one shots with it. You can do long campaigns with it, and just sprinkle these things throughout an overarching, plot. There's so many things to do. So many things.
And don't tell too much is the last thing I would say. Is
Definitely.
Is like give them a little bit, but if they're like, I don't understand what's going on, that's totally fine to be like, I don't know. Like,
sucks to be you. I'm here and I know everything.
Yeah, exactly.
What is the not seeing the monster is always scarier, because your imagination just goes nuts.
Yeah.
Just let your players' imaginations go wild.
My imagination is very sadistic. I don't know why I keep going to this.
So the last thing I want to say, just because that popped a story into my brain, was there was a time where I was running a part of a campaign where they went into an alternate reality version of the town that they were in, and everything was like horrible and apocalyptic and spooky, and like monsters were running around. And then the video store that they usually went to, called the Video Rodeo, in the normal reality was just a Blockbuster in the other reality. And I was like, and it's just a perfect Blockbuster, and it has power where all of the other like buildings don't have power, and it's like immaculate, and you see like the beautiful paint. And for some reason they were like, that fucking is horrible. That's like the worst. It's like in this blasted out town, a perfect Blockbuster with just this guy inside that had like a little name tag being like, hey, what are you guys renting, kind of thing. It was like the worst part. It was great. I loved it.
Oh God.
Well, thank you guys for this horror palooza.
Yeah, it was horrible to be here.
There we go.
Great.
I'm not going to even try. I can't do this.
I'm sure that we've only scratched the surface, but I think this is like a really great intro to horror. And thank you guys for joining me in Halloween Town. We will talk to you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.